You are now tuned in to the Expert Advice for Men podcast. For more information, visit us at www.expertadviceformen.com. And here is your host, Belltown Radley.
Hey guys, I hope everyone enjoyed their Labor Day weekend. To those starting school this week, good luck with your studies and hope all your hard work pays off. Welcome to a special Labor Day weekend edition of our podcast. This episode is a bit different than our regular episodes because within 2 months into the release of the Expert Advice for Men podcast, I've received a ton of DMs and emails with questions about myself and the podcast. This episode is dedicated to answering those questions I've received from you. But before we start, I want to let everyone know that we have a frequently asked questions section on our website. So be sure to check out our website, expertadviceformen.com, if you'd like to learn even more about this show. So let's get on with the questions. Question number 1, where does the Expert Advice for Men podcast broadcast from? Well, the podcast is broadcast from Seattle, Washington, USA, in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. Now, I knew there was potential for the podcast to be heard from listeners all over the world, and we've received DMs from those in Canada, India, Europe, Australia, Indonesia, basically all over the world. I'm blown away with the response and reach of the podcast, and I'm truly humbled by all of your support. Question number 2, where does the name Belltown Radley come from? First off, great question. And first off, I am a real human. Surprisingly, I get a few messages asking if there's really a Belltown Radley. Is there a Radley at all? And yes, there is a Radley, and Radley is my first name, my birth name. Now, the name Belltown, Belltown is a neighborhood in downtown Seattle, right next to the world-famous Pike Place Market and Space Needle, and I lived in Belltown most of my young adult life. At the time, Belltown was known for many great bars, restaurants, and nightlife. Places like, you guys remember, Club Medusa, Bada Lounge, 916, Belltown Billiards, Wasabi Bistro, and one of my personal favorites, Ohana. Shout out to Yosh and the crew at Ohana's. I bought my first condo in a Belltown high-rise many years back and enjoyed so many great memories with friends and family in the area. When friends would come down to visit, they'd all say, "Hey, let's visit Belltown Radley," and the nickname stuck ever since. Question number 3, Radley, did you quit your job to start this podcast? Are you hurting for money or something? Why are you doing this? So guys, I am not broke. I did not lose my job. I'm not hurting for money. This podcast is my personal passion project. I still have a career in healthcare, 16 years strong, I may add. I still have my real estate investment properties. I'm not broke. Quite the opposite, actually. I started this podcast as a personal desire to learn from experts and entrepreneurs on topics that I personally find interesting, mostly financial, health, tech, and lifestyle related, and I hope you find these topics interesting too. See, I don't play video games, I don't gamble, I don't go clubbing till 2 a.m. in the morning like the good old days. I started this podcast because I love listening and learning from podcasts, but I found that many were 2 to 3 hours long with all the good information hidden in between. So I wanted to create a podcast that still delivered on great information, but was easier to digest, 30, maybe 45-minute time frame, and that's what we've accomplished. For those who already know, I also have a background in audio engineering and was a former radio and nightclub DJ. So starting this podcast was a perfect blend to bring together my knowledge of audio engineering and a genuine desire to learn more with finances, health, tech, and lifestyle. So question number 4, how do you find your podcast guests? To start, I compiled a list of topics that genuinely interest me, things I wanted to learn and talk about. For example, our past episodes like tattoo removal, Harvard admissions advice, micro scalp pigmentation. These topics genuinely interested me. So after narrowing down the subject matter, I searched the internet, social media for the most qualified individuals for that subject. And because these topics genuinely interest me, the interviews naturally go well. So to be honest, I've been blessed with the guests I've had on our show. They've all been great interviews and I've learned a lot. Some of my guests have been complete strangers. At the same time, I've been fortunate to have some very talented, knowledgeable experts and entrepreneurs in my personal circle of friends. So I've reached out to those guys as well. So for those who've listened to podcast episode number 2 with Harvard undergraduate Lawson Wong, who I know personally, I'm going to paraphrase this a bit, but Lawson said something to the effect, the more friends you have, the more opportunities you have. And I 100% agree. So go out there, guys, make connections, make friends, and watch your opportunities grow. Now, question number 5. Radley, how can I get on the podcast? It's pretty easy. So if you want to be on the podcast, feel free to DM me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or go to our website, expertadviceformen.com, and shoot us an email under the contact section. Be sure to give your name, the topic you'd like to speak about, and your qualifications. And if it's a fit, let's get you on. So make sure to personally message me. Question number 6. Can you give my Instagram or my business a plug or a shout out? I get this question a lot. It's a very tricky question because it's something I just did not expect to happen. Since our podcast released 2 months ago, we currently have over 1,100 followers on Instagram. Now, it's not Joe Rogan's 5 or 6 million, but in 2 months, I consider it quite a lot of followers in such a short amount of time. Although I appreciate the support, I did not realize the amount of people who want me to plug their Instagram page or plug their business products. I'm very selective on who I promote on the podcast and my social media channels. First and foremost, I honor my guests first to promote their business as a thank you for their time being a guest on the podcast. See, guys, none of my guests are paid to be on the show. They volunteer their time to be on the show. So I owe it to our expert guests to promote their endeavors first. Now, question number 7. Belltown Radley, what is your angle? What are you trying to sell me? Now, guys, that is a great question. Honestly, I have nothing to sell. Check out my website. Check out our social media followings. I don't have any shirts. I have no online mentor programs. I'm not into Forex, Bitcoin, sales funnels, ClickFunnels. This podcast is 100% free. Now, am I funding this podcast myself? Yes. At this time, this podcast is 100% funded personally by myself. And I guess this is a perfect lead-in to our announcement that we are in the works to announce our first podcast sponsor. Woot woot. So be on the lookout for that announcement soon. We're going to have our first sponsor of the podcast. Now, the last question, what's next for your podcast? So just as I announced, we're looking into sponsorship soon. So if you want to be a sponsor of the podcast, feel free to DM me. And many of you guys have commented I should post more personal pictures and videos. I'm planning to add more personal touches to our social media platforms. I guess you guys want to see my personal life. I don't know why, but I guess it means that you guys want to know more about me, which is great, and more about the podcast, which is also great. So more personal posts and videos and story feeds are in the works. But above all, I'm about providing great information for you guys. So in the future, I plan to keep having great experts on the show to share their stories and insight, to not just take your game to the next level. I want my game to get to that next level too. I want to step up my game in finance and health, just everything. So I want to make sure that we get the best guests on our show above all. So we'll have more entrepreneurial stories, lifestyle experts, and in the next few weeks, we're going to start doing some more health-related experts on the show because, as they say, health is wealth. So I want to make sure we go back into the healthcare, the health profession, and health advice for you guys out there. Now, because of the holiday weekend, I want to keep this special Labor Day weekend episode short and to the point. So that's going to be all for today. So join us again next Monday for another Expert Advice for Men podcast. Until next time, guys, go out there and make it happen.
Thank you for listening to the Expert Advice for Men podcast with your host, Belltown Radley. If you enjoyed our show, make sure to rate it 5 stars, leave a positive comment, and share it with your friends. Your support means everything. Until next time, this is the Expert Advice for Men podcast.